We live in a world that often discourages true thought. We are flooded with information, hot takes, and pre-packaged opinions. We scroll through headlines, we share slogans, we fall into the comfortable echo chambers of our chosen groups. It can feel easier to float along on the currents of popular opinion, to live on a kind of mental autopilot. But what is the cost of this thoughtlessness? What are the consequences of outsourcing our own conscience to the crowd? What if I told you that the greatest evil in the world isn't committed by monsters, but by people just like you and me, who were simply too busy, too distracted, or too certain to think? You've felt the pressure, that quiet moment in a meeting, a family gathering, or a comments section where everyone agrees on something that feels off. There's a pull to nod along, to not be the difficult one, to merge with the safety of the crowd. So you stay silent. It feels easier. It feels safer. But what you're actually doing is outsourcing your conscience. And that small, daily act of thoughtlessness is the most dangerous thing a human being can do. Hannah Arendt witnessed the greatest horrors of the 20th century and made a terrifying discovery. She found that the greatest evils are often not committed by monsters, but by ordinary people. Not because they were filled with hate, but because they have simply given up the activity of thinking for themselves. If you have ever felt overwhelmed by the noise of the world, or found yourself going along with an idea you hadn't truly examined, then you are in the right place. This is a path to discovering that true morality is not about following rules, but about engaging in a deep and continuous conversation with yourself. If you are ready to reclaim your own mind and discover the moral power of your own thoughts, I invite you into a space of honest reflection. Do not be afraid to look at the difficult questions, for it is in this very courageous act of looking, of questioning, that we find our deepest humanity. This isn't just a history lesson, this is an intervention. And today you'll learn to cultivate the inner dialogue that is the foundation of your conscience and your humanity, so robust that no crowd, no ideology, and no authority can ever silence it. To understand Arendt's thought, we must travel with her to a courtroom in Jerusalem in 1961. In a glass booth, on trial for his life, sits Adolf Eichmann, one of the chief architects of the Holocaust, the logistical mastermind behind the murder of millions. The world expected to see a monster, a diabolical genius, a twisted, hateful sadist. They wanted to look into the face of evil and see a snarling, terrifying beast. But Hannah Arendt, reporting on the trial, saw something else entirely. And what she saw shocked her, and the world, far more than any monster could have. She saw a bland, mediocre bureaucrat, a man who was not stupid, but was, in her words, terrifyingly normal. He spoke in cliches, in stock phrases, in the jargon of his office. His main concerns seemed to be that he hadn't received the promotions he deserved. He wasn't an ideological fanatic. He was a joiner, a man whose conscience had been replaced by a rule book. He did monstrous things, not because he was a monster, but because he had, in a very real sense, stopped thinking. This was the birth of her most famous and controversial idea, the banality of evil. The idea that evil is not always radical, deep, and demonic. Often it is profoundly shallow. It is a fungus that grows in the dark, empty spaces of a thoughtless mind. Eichmann was not a lion of wickedness. He was an insect carried along on a powerful, unexamined current. It is easy to distance ourselves from a figure like Eichmann, but Arendt's warning was not about him. It was about us. It was a warning about the profound danger of living a thoughtless life. What does it mean to be thoughtless? It is to live entirely on the surface of things. It is to accept slogans as if they are arguments. It is to share a headline without ever reading the article. It is to adopt the opinions of your chosen group, your political party, your social circle, your online tribe, without ever subjecting them to your own internal scrutiny. It is the comfort of the echo chamber, where your own unexamined beliefs are repeated back to you over and over until they feel like absolute truth. The danger of this is that our capacity for moral judgment begins to atrophy. It's like a muscle that is never used. We forget how to think for ourselves. We lose the ability to see a situation from another person's perspective. Our conscience, which should be a living, breathing dialogue within us, becomes a cheap, pre-recorded message that we just play on loop. And in this state of thoughtlessness, we become like driftwood. We have no anchor. We have no rudder. We are simply carried along by the strongest social and political currents of our time. And as history has shown us, those currents can lead to the most terrible of places. At this point, a reasonable voice might object. But wait, isn't this just a recipe for paralysis? If I question everything, if I'm constantly locked in a deep inner dialogue, how will I ever get anything done? Isn't it better to sometimes just act, to be decisive, to trust your gut? This is an essential question, and Arendt was not advocating for a life of unproductive, anxious brooding. She drew a crucial distinction between thinking and knowing. The goal of knowing is to arrive at a final answer, a piece of data, a solid conclusion. This is the realm of science, of logic, of problem solving. It is essential for navigating the practical world. But the goal of thinking for Arendt is entirely different. Thinking is not about finding a final answer. It is about the process itself. It is the constant, restless, and often inconclusive dialogue that we have with ourselves about the meaning of our experience. It doesn't stop when you find an answer. It is a way of being. It is the activity that keeps our conscience alive and awake. You can act decisively, and then later, in the quiet of the evening, you can think about that action. So, the fear of paralysis is a misunderstanding. Thinking is not the enemy of action. Thoughtlessness is. Thinking is what ensures our actions are rooted in a conscious, examined, and human place. So what is this activity of thinking really? For Arendt, it was a profound internal conversation. She called it the two-in-one. Imagine that when you are truly thinking, you split into two. There is the I who is living in the world, and there is the other I, the silent witness, the inner companion who you are in dialogue with. You are both the questioner and the one who is questioned. This inner dialogue is the very essence of your conscience. When you consider doing something, you are, on some level, asking your inner companion, can we do this and still live together in peace? When you have already done something, you report back to that inner self, and you have a conversation about it. A person with a healthy, active inner dialogue finds it very difficult to do evil. Why? Because they know they will have to go home and face their roommate. They will have to live moment to moment with the one person who knows exactly what they did and why. An evil act, then, is any act that would make it impossible for you to remain friends with yourself. This is Arendt's profound reframing. Morality is not a set of external rules to be followed. Morality is the quality of the relationship you have with your own self. To be a good person is simply to be committed to keeping that inner dialogue honest, alive, and healthy. The world will always be noisy. The currents of the crowd will always be strong. We cannot control this, but we can always choose to cultivate the quiet space within. I invite you to hold a final, powerful image in your mind. Imagine that in the very center of your being, there is a quiet, simple room. In this room, there is a table and two chairs. This is the home of your conscience. One chair is for you, the actor in the world. The other is for your silent companion, the witness, the other half of your dialogue. This is the person you must live with for your entire life. To think is to choose to enter this room. to sit down and to have an honest conversation. To be thoughtless is to leave this room empty, to let it gather dust until you forget it is even there. I want you to imagine yourself entering this quiet, sacred room. You sit down at the table across from the one person whose company matters most. There is no judgment here, no condemnation, only a clear and honest conversation. This dialogue is the most important work you will ever do. It is the source of your integrity. It is the anchor of your humanity. Now find comfort in the good and thoughtful company of yourself.